We can now bring in Peter Zalmayev, Director of the Eurasia Democracy Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. During these talks in Istanbul, both sides, the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, were supposed to present their plans for peace. I'm curious to know, who has the upper hand going into these talks?
It's really hard to say. First of all, I would caution even the Ukrainian president against using this, Pearl Harbor analogy, simply because, the perpetrator of that was a aggressor state such as the Nazi fascist Japan, right? And then what did it lead to? We wound up in a nuclear scenario. So I hope that that does not apply in this case. I think going in to these negotiations, Ukraine understood very well that no amount of carrots or sticks necessarily will sway Vladimir Putin's opinion and his fixation on Ukraine. Whatever carrots that Donald Trump has been showing time and again to Vladimir Putin, Putin has only been increasing his terror attacks on Ukrainian cities. So by striking so deep inside Russian territory and exposing its vulnerability, the question is, well, how much worse is it going to get for Ukrainians? Yes, we are expecting a retaliatory strike, but it would come regardless, because that's what Putin's modus operandi is. I think the important thing that had to be shown and was shown is that Ukraine, contrary to Donald Trump's Oval Office pronouncement, as you saw, does have cards. It does have cards. And as President Zelensky has said, we are soon going to be in the territory where Ukraine will be able to produce 40% of its own needs in weaponry. And that is significant.
Do you think that is what Kyiv was trying to demonstrate to Russia, to the United States, that, look, we still have tricks up our sleeves, and we don't need to use your missiles to do it. We can use our homegrown drone technology.
Yes, and it is all. I think it was mentioned in The Guardian. One of the columnists in The Guardian put it that before it looks like NATO should be begging very soon Ukraine to join it, because what Ukraine is showing, the sort of mastery of technology, the way Ukraine has been rewriting rules, military rules and military handbooks, is unprecedented. So this actually has led to some serious, change of heart in the capitals in Europe about Ukraine's ability to be a worthy member of NATO. And I think coming on the heels of the European decision to allow Ukraine to strike deep inside Russia, and the thinking in Germany that maybe Berlin is ready to give Ukraine Taurus missiles, it could not have come at a better moment.
You mentioned NATO, and I want to jump in there because the United States has been quite clear under Donald Trump that Ukraine joining NATO is unrealistic. Last week, I interviewed a former British Army officer who said seems to be the consensus among many NATO member states, even though they won't publicly say it. At one point, Kyiv also, he said, the thinking has shifted where you are. Is that the case? Have authorities come to grips with the fact that Ukraine probably won't join the military alliance?
Well, that is probably a fait accompli, and actually, it's another demonstration of how Vladimir Putin. This war is not about Ukraine joining or not joining NATO. It's not about controlling this or that part of Ukraine. It's controlling all of Ukraine and destroying it as a sovereign state, because Trump has essentially given Putin everything he wanted. You want Crimea and an official recognition, we'll give it to you. You want the Donbass, we'll give it to you. You want a hard no to Ukraine's membership in NATO, we will give it to you. And still, Putin is throwing 500 drones against us every day. So it just shows you where we at right now. And I think that in the situation where Ukraine is essentially, what it's doing is serving as a fortress NATO. Without being a member, it is neutralizing Russia's nuclear capabilities by striking against and maybe disabling as much as a third of its nuclear bearing airplanes. I mean, this is unprecedented. So in the absence of a political will to accept Ukraine into the alliance, the Western leaders have to start getting together, butting heads, and deciding on a formula that would provide Ukraine with a solid clad guarantee in the absence of a full-fledged NATO membership.
Peter, yesterday's attack, Ukraine's attack on Russian bases was bold, it was audacious, but it also took a year and a half to plan. That is what some reports are saying. So this is clearly a long time. Does it help with morale where you are, particularly amongst the troops who have been fighting this war for over 3 years now?
Well, it does. I mean, it does. And even though we do suffer shortly afterwards, if you remember the strike on the Kerch Bridge, the bridge connecting Russia proper with the occupied Crimea, and that was, what, 2.5 years ago, and that led in short order to actually the start of full-fledged kind of campaign against civilians, with strikes on Kiev, right next to my house. You remember that was, I think, October 10th of 2022 when that happened. And so, yes, we will suffer the consequences, but I think Ukrainians are now so hardened that they don't want to even think that far ahead. They will take anything to lift their spirits. And judging by the proliferation of various memes on the internet and just the reactions that I'm seeing from people, yes, it does serve to boost our morale.
Peter, if you don't mind staying with us, we're just going to go across to Vladimir Zelensky. I believe he's speaking from a summit in Vilnius.
The upcoming NATO summit can strengthen Europe's security, or if it sends the wrong signal, it will only encourage Putin. The key to lasting peace is clear. The aggressor must not receive any reward for war. Putin must get nothing that would justify his aggression. Any reward would only show him that war pays off. Geopolitical gains are just as important to Russia as money or territory. If Putin is allowed to decide who joins NATO, where NATO infrastructure can or can't be, then Russia's appetite for war will only grow. Our shared goal is the opposite, to completely end Russia's hunger for aggression. Ukraine is doing its part, and I am grateful to all partners who are doing theirs. And we must act as one united Euro-Atlantic community. The NATO summit in June is the right place and the right time to send a clear message. Russia will not get anything from this war. Strong decisions are needed. Decisions for Europe, not for Putin. We all need to work together to make this really happen, and it's doable. Thank you, everyone who helped us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Zelensky, President of Romania. The floor is yours now.
For me, it's the
Okay, I'd like to bring in Peter Zalmayev in once again. Peter, you just heard there from Ukraine's president essentially talking about that upcoming NATO summit, which is going to be taking place in June, I believe, in The Hague. And Ukraine has not been invited to that summit, from what I understand. What sort of message do you think that sends to Vladimir Zelensky that he's been left out of this upcoming meeting?
It's not very encouraging, but I think that President Zelensky could not have put it better. What he really said and what we really heard is that Ukraine is doing a huge service to the very world order on which the world stands, Europe's security including. By preventing this principle of might makes right, redrawing borders at whim from triumphing, and this is very important. Imagine the consequences if Russia is allowed once again to prevail in Ukraine, and the sort of precedent it will set for Europe, how it will lead and encourage Russia in its creeping aggression against Europe, whether it's an outright aggression or not, we don't know. But Russia is already engaged in a whole campaign of sabotage against European democracies, meddling in elections, all sorts of toxic things are happening. Then you think about all the precedents around the world that will set, from Guyana versus Venezuela, China, Beijing versus Taiwan, etc. And once again, I think that's what partially explains Germany's newfound willingness to support Ukraine much more muscularly, is the realization that if Ukraine is allowed to fall, imagine how many more millions Ukrainian refugees will be spilling over across to elsewhere to Europe, including Germany, France, and elsewhere. And imagine the sort of pressure it will create on these countries' welfare systems.
Peter, we're getting reports from Turkey's foreign ministry that the latest round of face-to-face talks in Istanbul have ended between the Russian and the Ukrainian delegation. I know that there were low expectations going into this round of talks, but we also got reports that the Ukrainian delegation has given a list of deported children's names. And after the first round of talks, we did see that prisoner exchange that took place. From where you're sitting, are people hopeful that something will come out of this face-to-face dialogue that is taking place, that has started to take place?
We saw that in the first round of talks, that it has led to the exchange of 1,000 POWs, and we can never underestimate hoping in our sort of in our ivory towers, wherever we may be, for a shift in grand narratives here. But at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it's just a human story of their loved one who's been prisoner of war, who's suffered tremendous harm to his body, and that's how Ukrainians have been kept as prisoners in Russia. I mean, you should see how they come back emaciated, and it's a really terrible sight. So we can never discount that. And the story with the children is the ongoing tragedy of our times. It's one of the worst war crimes that the Russian side has committed. That has led actually to the ICC's decision to charge Vladimir Putin and his children's ombudsman with war crimes. And as a Ukrainian American, I will say that I've been disheartened to see how the Trump administration has decided to sort of give up on being involved in this matter and investigating it. It should reconsider.
Since you mentioned Donald Trump, I want to talk about U.S. military assistance, because Donald Trump, he's not said what is going to happen once it runs out, but for all practical purposes, one can assume that once it runs out, he's not going to go to Congress and ask for more military aid for Ukraine. What happens then? How does that change what happens on the battlefield, given that the Americans have been shouldering the bulk of the responsibility?
Yes, it's going to be tough. It's not, never say never. It ain't over till it's over. Like one of the, great American baseball players is reported to have said, you have a support of 80 U.S. senators out of a total of 100 for harsh sanctions on Russia. That is a significant step in the context of how most of the Republican Party is really just become a party of yes-sayers to Donald Trump, and has essentially abnegated his responsibility to serve as a check on the executive power. So Ukraine remains that incredibly bipartisan issue in this, I think historically polarized time that America is going through. So let's not say it's a done deal yet. Trump may be brought around yet, because he sees how Vladimir Putin has been playing him and making him look weak and humiliating him. You have to also understand that. But also, once again, and this is the importance of this operation, once again, coming back to what happened just 2 days ago, how Ukraine struck deep inside Russia's territory. It showed Ukraine capabilities. It showed that Ukraine does have cards. And like I said, Zelensky is saying we will soon reach the ability to produce 40% of our needs in weaponry inside the country. So at the end of the day, Ukraine will need economic support, but a lot of its needs can be fulfilled domestically. But once again, there's this very crucial time in between now and before we reach that time, where we'll be very vulnerable. And that's
Indeed.
why we need a concerted action on the part of Western leaders to help Ukraine, especially that Vladimir Putin now is counting on the success of his summer campaign that he's starting. He is hoping to capture much of the Sumy region, and this way he will be threatening the capital again.
Peter, thank you very much for that, Peter Zalmayev, joining us there from Kyiv. And we have news coming in from Ukraine's president that both Russia and Ukraine are readying a new prisoner exchange, which will be taking place after the second round of talks, which just wrapped up in Istanbul.